Her mother's final gift. They took everything except her secret, a story of betrayal, and the quiet revenge that grew from it. Story of a woman who left destitute and blamed by her wealthy in-laws after her husband's disappearance, discovers her late mother's final gift, a mysterious trust fund she can only claim by completing a series of symbolic tasks that force her to reclaim her power. My mother always said that the most important letter you'll ever receive won't come in the mail. She was right. I found mine the day my life was auctioned off to the highest bidder. Now let's start the story. As my mother always said that the most important letter you'll ever receive won't come in the mail, she was right. I found mine the day my life was auctioned off to the highest bidder. The auctioneer wasn't a man with a gavel. She was my mother-in-law, Eleanor Wellington, standing at a bank of microphones in front of the limestone facade of the Wellington International Headquarters. On the 60-inch screen, in what used to be my living room, her pearl necklace gleamed with the same cold perfection as her smile. A tragic personal collapse. Her voice, crisp and wounded, filled the cavernous space of the Greenwich Estate's great room. My son Carter was a sensitive soul. The pressures, the constant disappointments in his private life. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. The camera cut to a paparazzi shot of me from yesterday, hair unwashed, clutching my daughter Lily's hand as we fled our previous apartment. My eyes wide with a panic I refused to let become tears. The caption below it read, "Ilara Grant, wife of missing financier Carter Wellington." Ex-wife, I thought numbly. The papers had been delivered that morning. My lawyer's voice was a tinny buzz in my ear through the phone. "Ilara, don't watch it. They're constructing a narrative." But I couldn't look away. I was a moth to the flame of my own immolation. Eleanor's eyes, the color of winter sky, found the camera lens. The Wellington family will, of course, cooperate fully with authorities to recover the misplaced funds. Our primary concern now is the well-being of our granddaughter, Lily, and providing her with the stability and legacy she deserves. The word misplaced was a masterpiece. The word legacy was a threat. As the segment ended, cutting to a talking head discussing financial fraud and family dysfunction, the first car arrived. Not a police car, a black Lincoln with discreet plates. A man in a dark suit got out, accompanied by a severe woman holding a leather binder. Eleanor's cavalry, the home managers. The doorbell didn't chime. It echoed. Lily, my bright, fierce 8-year-old, pressed herself against my side on the oversized sofa that had never felt like ours. "Mommy? Who's that?" "The people who own the house, sweetheart," I said, my voice strangely calm. I answered the door. The suit, whose name was Mr. Aldridge, offered a thin smile that didn't touch his eyes. "Mrs. Grant, per the terms of the emergency injunction filed by Mrs. Eleanor Wellington, and given the freezing of joint assets under investigation, we are here to secure the Wellington properties. You have 2 hours to remove personal effects." The woman with the binder stepped past me, already cataloging the art, the furniture, the curated evidence of a life that was always alone. The next 2 hours were a blur of surreal, brutal efficiency. Lily clutched her stuffed owl, Hoot, her small face a mask of confusion. I packed 2 suitcases with what truly mattered: our clothes, Lily's favorite books, my own worn sketchpad, and a single, unopened cardboard box, labeled Clara's Studio in my mother's looping handwriting. Everything else, the designer gowns, the jewelry Carter had given me, always with a comment about how it suited the wife of a Wellington. The trophy pieces of our marriage, I left. Let the vultures have it. As we wheeled our suitcases down the grand driveway, the Lincoln still idling at the curb to ensure our exit, Lily looked back at the only home she'd ever known. Where are we going? I didn't have an answer. My phone, with its dying battery, showed my bank balance, $412.18. The joint accounts were frozen. My credit cards, all under the Wellington umbrella, were declined at the gas station yesterday. We went to a motel off the interstate that rented by the week. The room smelled of antiseptic and old cigarettes. That night, as Lily finally cried herself to sleep, the dam inside me broke. Silent, heaving sobs shook my body. It wasn't just the money, the home, the humiliation. It was the eradication of my identity. I had become Elara Wellington, then Elara Grant again, and now I was just a photo in a tabloid, a suspect, a failed wife. In the gray light of dawn, with Lily still sleeping, I finally opened the box I'd been carrying for 15 years. It smelled of turpentine and lavender, the scent of my mother. Inside were tubes of hardened oil paint, charcoal nubs, a palette knife, and a few books. No hidden treasure, just the ghosts of a woman who lived in color, who died too young, and whose daughter chose gilded cages over a messy, vibrant studio. I was about to close it when I saw the spine at her favorite novel, The Secret Garden, worn and soft. I pulled it out, and a sealed, cream-colored envelope, brittle with age, slid from between the pages. My name was written on the front, in her familiar, elegant script. And below it, 4 words that made my breath catch. For when the walls close in. With trembling hands, I broke the wax seal, a simple C pressed into dark red wax. The letter inside was a single page. My dearest Elara, if you are reading this, the world has shown you its teeth. They have told you that you are small, that you belong to them, that the walls they built are your home. They are wrong. Long ago, I set aside a key, not to a door, but to a cage of your own making. I called it the Liberation Trust. It is not a fortune, but it is a future, one they cannot touch. But money alone does not free a soul. To claim it, you must prove you are ready to walk out of the shadow of their house and build your own. You must complete 3 tasks. Build something with your own hands, not for them, for you. Speak your truth in the lion's den. Let them hear your roar. Make something beautiful grow from ruin. The lawyer's details are on the back. He will know you have succeeded when you show him what you have built, what you have said, and what you have grown. You are my daughter, the strongest thing I ever made. Remember who you were before they told you who to be. All my love. Forever. Mom, I read it twice. 3 times. A sob, but different this time, laced with a spark of something I hadn't felt in years, caught in my throat. Liberation, trust. 3 tasks. On the back was a name, Atticus Finchley, Esquire, and an address in a part of the city I hadn't visited in a decade. Outside the motel room window, the sun broke through the clouds. Lily stirred. "Mommy?" she mumbled. "What is it?" I looked from her sleepy, trusting face to the letter in my hands, the words of my mother, a woman who knew nothing of Carter or the Wellingtons, but understood everything about cages, seeming to glow on the page. I wiped my cheek and managed a real smile. "It's a map, baby," I whispered, the first ember of defiance warming my chest. Mummy just found a map. The map led to a part of the city where the buildings didn't gleam, where the air smelled of sawdust and coffee, not money and anxiety. The address on the letter was a converted brick warehouse with a faded sign, The Hearth Artisan Co-op. Atticus Finchley's office was on the 2nd floor, above a potter's studio. He wasn't a sleek corporate lawyer. He was an older man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, a cardigan, and a wall of books that actually looked red. He took the letter from my shaking hands, read it slowly, and a soft smile touched his lips. "Clara," he said, the name a sigh of fond memory. She was a force. She paid my retainer 20 years ago with 3 of her paintings. Said she was prepaying for a day when her daughter might need an ally, not an employee. I've been holding her trust ever since. Hope, fragile as a bird, lifted in my chest. "How much?" ? He held up a gentle hand. "The terms are clear, Ilara. The trust is a living thing. It activates upon proof of growth. The first task." He leaned forward. "Build something with your own hands. Not for them, for you." Clara was very specific. "So, what can your hands do?" I looked at my hands, manicured but empty. They'd held champagne flutes, steering wheels, Lily's hand. What had they built? A memory surfaced. Me, at 12, in my mother's sun-drenched studio, guiding a piece of cherry wood under the buzzing blade of a bandsaw, her hands steady over mine. The smell of fresh-cut pine, the birth of a clumsy, lopsided birdhouse. "Wood," I whispered. "My mother taught me woodworking, a little." Atticus's smile widened. "Then you should talk to Gabriel downstairs. He runs the wood shop. Tell him I sent you." Gabriel was a man in his 50s, with sawdust in his salt and pepper hair, and a permanent squint for measuring things by eye. You listened, arms crossed, as I stumbled through explanation about needing work, about my mother, about starting over. He didn't ask about the news. He just pointed to a chaotic corner piled with offcuts. "See that maple? It's good wood, hiding in there. Your first job is to sort it, hardwood from soft. Then you can sweep." It wasn't building. It was organizing. It was sweeping. It was humble, hard, and paid barely above minimum wage. But when I picked up a piece of walnut, feeling its dense, smooth grain under my thumb, something in my soul, long atrophied, twitched awake. I rented a tiny, furnished apartment with windows that actually opened. Lily started at a new school, her bravery a knife in my heart. Every day, I sorted wood. I swept mountains of sawdust. I listened to the rhythmic sounds of creation, the whir of lathes, the bang of hammers, the sandpaper's whisper. After 2 weeks, Gabriel grunted at me. "You watch enough. That oak slab, it's got a crack. Can't sell it as a tabletop. Make something out of it. For you." My project. Lie hands. The crack in the oak looked like a lightning bolt. Instead of fighting it, I followed it. I used a router to gently widen it into a river shape. I filled it with blue-tinted epoxy, the color of my mother's eyes. I sanded for days until the wood felt like silk and the river gleamed. I fashioned simple legs. It became a small, unique hall table. The day I finished it, applying the last coat of oil, Gabriel stood beside me, nodding silently. The other artisans, the potter, the glassblower, the weaver, came over. No one said pretty. They touched the wood, felt the finish, respected the craft. "It's alive now," the potter Maeve said. "You gave it a second story." That night, I took a picture of the table in my sparse apartment, with Lily's drawings proudly displayed on it. I sent it to Atticus. The next day, a bank envelope appeared in my co-op mailbox. Not a check for millions. A modest, real sum, enough to cover 3 months' rent and breathe without a vice on my lungs. A note from Atticus. "For the builder, task 1 is complete. The trust is stirring. Remember, the money is a tool, not the prize. The prize is in your hands." I ran my fingers over the smooth oak. I had built this. It was the first thing in years that was truly, wholly mine. That's when the official custody summons arrived. Eleanor Wellington wasn't waiting for me to fail. She was engineering it. The petition cited unstable housing, precarious income, and the emotional detriment of a mother embroiled in public scandal. She wanted Lily moved to the stable, nurturing environment of the Wellington estate. The lion's den wasn't a metaphor. It was a family court, and Eleanor would be there, a queen holding a scepter of legal papers. My new lawyer, paid for with the first activation of my mother's trust, was a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Rosa. They have prestige. We have truth, but truth is quiet. You'll have to speak it, loudly. The night before the hearing, I didn't sleep. I sat at my oak table, the letter before me. Speak your truth in the lion's den. What was my truth? That I was scared, that I felt broken. That was true, but it wasn't all. My truth was that I had traded my voice for a gilded silence. My truth was that I let them define me. My truth was that I was Clara's daughter, and I had forgotten how to roar. I looked at the picture of my mother on the table, a young woman laughing, covered in paint, fearless. I looked at Lily, sleeping peacefully in the next room, trusting me to be her fortress. I wasn't just fighting for my daughter. I was fighting for the woman I was supposed to become. The next morning, I put on a simple, confident blazer. Not Wellington couture, but bought with my own money from my own work. I kissed Lily goodbye. "Where are you going, Mommy?" she asked. "To the lion's den, sweetheart," I said, my voice steady. "To tell them a story." As I walked out the door, the second task awaiting me in a sterile courtroom, I felt it. Not just fear, not just anger. It was a low, gathering rumble in my bones. It was the beginning of a roar. The courtroom was not what I expected. It was smaller, quieter. The place where lives were dismantled with procedural murmurs, not dramatic shouts. But the chill was the same. Eleanor sat at the opposite table, a portrait of dignified suffering in navy Saint Laurent. She didn't look at me. Her lawyer, a man with a voice like polished ice, began to paint his picture. My instability, the motel, the hobbyist job, the unfit environment. My lawyer, Rosa, countered with facts. Stable housing, steady income, Lily's excellent school reports. It was a dry exchange of documents. I felt myself shrinking, becoming a case file again. Then the judge, a weary-eyed woman, looked at me. "Ms. Grant, the petition suggests you are emotionally overwhelmed by recent events, that this turmoil impacts your child. What is your response?" Eleanor finally turned her head. Her gaze was not hateful, but empty, as if I were a smudge on a window to be wiped away. That emptiness was the spark. My heart hammered, but my voice, when it came, was clear. It filled the small room. "My daughter is not impacted by my turmoil, Your Honor. She is impacted by the people who caused it. The instability was being evicted by her grandmother. The precarious income resulted from my assets being frozen by that same family. The turmoil is being publicly branded a criminal by them without evidence." I looked directly at Eleanor, holding that cold, empty gaze. "My truth is this. I was married to a facade. I lived in a beautiful cage, and when that cage collapsed, I was blamed for the wreckage. But in that wreckage, I found myself. I build furniture now, with my hands. I pay my rent with money I earn. I teach my daughter that her value isn't in a name, but in her own character. That is the environment I provide. Not prestige, not legacy, but integrity." The room was silent. Even the ice-voiced lawyer paused. Eleanor's mask of dignity slipped for 1 microsecond, revealing pure, unadulterated shock. I had not argued. I had testified. And I had just called the great Eleanor Wellington a liar in a room that mattered. The judge's expression shifted, subtly, from weariness to interest. She adjourned for a short recess. In the hall, Rosa squeezed my arm. "That," she whispered, "was the roar." My hands trembled, but with power, not fear. I had spoken. The lion had heard me. Atticus texted as I left the courthouse. The petition for emergency custody denied. The trust hears you, Ilara. It grows stronger. Now, for the final task, find the ruined soil. Plant your seed. The ruined soil. It wasn't my life. My life was growing green again. It was theirs. I knew what I had to do. The seed was the truth, the whole ugly truth, and I knew exactly where it was buried. The where was a person, not a place. Samuel, the family's former driver, a man of quiet dignity who'd been retired with a modest payoff the day after Carter vanished. I found him through an old, loyal housekeeper, Mrs. Higgins, who risked her own pension to slip me a phone number and a warning. He's scared, dear. They made sure of that. Samuel agreed to meet at the city's sprawling botanical garden, a public place he deemed safe. He was a wiry man in his 60s, his posture still perfectly straight, but his eyes held a permanent flinch. "Mrs. Grant," he said, nodding by a bed of lilies, "I can't be seen with you." "I know. Thank you for coming. I didn't do it for you. I did it for Mr. Carter. He wasn't a good man in the end, but he wasn't what they're saying." Samuel's voice was low, his gaze scanning the pads. The night he left, I drove him. He was on the phone, arguing. With her, not yelling, pleading. "Mother, they're going to trace it back to you, to the foundation." He kept saying that, the foundation. The Wellington Family Foundation, the pristine charitable arm. A cold realization dawned. He wasn't embezzling from the company to cover his gambling, I whispered, the puzzle pieces grinding into a horrifying new picture. He was moving money into the foundation, to hide it, to clean it. Samuel gave a tight nod. The big money, the fraudulent transfers. They were authorized, but not by him alone. There was a second signature, a protocol for the foundation's discretionary fund. She has it, Mrs. Wellington. Eleanor, she wasn't just covering up his failure. She was using the family's charity as a laundering sink. The truth wasn't just ugly. It was monstrous. "I need proof, Samuel." He looked at me, pity and fear wrestling in his eyes. "The proof is a ghost. It's digital. It's in servers guarded by men in suits with no names. You can't fight that." "Yes, you do know someone who might have seen the ghost," I pressed. "The system administrator, the IT person who set up the private server for the foundation." A long silence, a war behind his eyes. Finally, he sighed. "His name is Leo Mancini. He was let go 6 months ago, with a very large severance and a very thick non-disclosure agreement. He lives upstate now. He won't talk." "He might," I said, a plan beginning to form, "if he learns the NDA was used to cover up a crime, not protect trade secrets. If he learns his silence makes him an accessory." I gave Samuel my new, clean burner phone number. "If you remember anything else, anything at all." As I walked away, the seed of truth now had a name, Leo Mancini, and I knew my own hands weren't enough to dig it up. I needed a different kind of builder. I went to the only person I knew who operated in the shadows between the physical and digital worlds, Gabriel's niece, Maya, who often helped at the co-op with its website. She was in her 20s, a cybersecurity student with purple streaks in her hair and a distrustful glare. "You want me to what? Hack the Wellington Foundation?" she said, incredulous, after I laid out my plea in the back office. "That's not a help with the WordPress site favor. That's federal crime territory. I don't want you to hack anything," I said, sliding a notepad toward her. On it, I'd written Leo Mancini's name and the old address Samuel had whispered. "I want you to find him, and I want you to find a public, legal pressure point. Did the foundation get any government grants? Are they up for a compliance audit? Is there a whistleblower protection angle for a former IT employee who was paid to stay quiet? Maya looked at the name, then at me, reassessing. This is a fishing expedition. You want me to find the hook? Exactly. A week later, she had it. Using nothing but deep-dive public record searches and social engineering, posing as a journalist for a tech ethics blog, she discovered two critical facts. First, Leo was deeply in debt. Despite his severance, his wife had ongoing medical bills. Second, the Wellington Family Foundation had recently applied for and received a multi-million-dollar federal grant for urban community tech hubs, a grant with stringent transparency and audit requirements. The hook, Maya said, pointing at her screen, is that if malfeasance is proven, not only does the grant get clawed back with massive penalties, but the person who reveals it is entitled to a portion of the recovered funds as a whistleblower award. It's legally protected and potentially very lucrative. It was the lever I needed. Atticus helped me draft a letter, sent by certified mail to Leo Mancini. It contained no threats, only facts. What I suspected about the foundation, the federal grant number, the specific whistleblower statute, and the name of a lawyer specializing in such cases, who was expecting his call. The last line read, "Your silence has a price, but so does your conscience. One enriches them, the other could free you." The waiting was agony. I threw myself into my work at the co-op, now designing a line of custom inlaid jewelry boxes, building beauty to distract from the ugliness I was unearthing. Then, a week later, an encrypted file appeared in an email account Maya had set up for me. No message, just a folder. Inside were schematic documents for a private, air-gapped server setup, the Foundation's secure system, and most damningly, access logs. They showed a single user terminal registered to Eleanor Wellington's office, initiating automated transfers on the same dates as the major fraudulent transactions, with a second administrative approval signature from a user named CFO Proxy, Carter's forced alias. It was a blueprint of the conspiracy. The seed had sprouted a vine, and it was climbing right up to Eleanor's desk. But evidence from a hacker, even for a whistleblower, was tainted fruit. We needed Leo to testify, to hand it over himself. His call came on a rainy Tuesday. His voice was tired, but clear. "I'll talk to the feds, but only if my family is protected, and only after the story is public. I need a shield of daylight." We had our witness. Now we needed our megaphone. The megaphone was Anya Petrova, an investigative journalist whose byline was synonymous with taking down corrupt institutions. Getting to her was another task. I used the last of my mother's tool money to hire a PR consultant for 1 hour who gave me the golden advice: don't send the story, send the source. I wrote to Anya, not as a victim, but as a source with primary evidence and a corroborating witness ready to go on the record. I attached a single, redacted page from the server logs. Point. She responded in 3 hours. We met in the back of a noisy anonymous diner. Point. "You understand," she said, her eyes sharp and missing nothing. "This will detonate your life again, and your daughter's. The Wellingtons will throw everything at you. My life was already detonated. I said, pushing a full copy of the file across the table. This isn't about my life anymore. It's about the truth, and it's about every dollar meant for a community center that went into a shell company instead. Anya's story broke on a Sunday morning. It wasn't a tabloid splash. It was a forensic 15,000-word piece in a paper of record, detailing the Wellington double ledger, complete with documents, timelines, and quotes from a former senior IT architect confirming the system's illicit design. The effect was nuclear. Federal agents raided the Foundation offices. The grant was suspended. Wellington International's stock plummeted. The board, facing existential liability, voted unanimously to remove Eleanor from all positions and publicly disavow her actions, throwing her to the wolves to save the corporate carcass. The final court hearing for Lily's custody was a formality. Eleanor didn't even show. Her lawyer submitted a brief, terse statement withdrawing the petition without prejudice. The judge closed the file with a quiet, definitive tap of her gavel. It was over. It was over. A month later, Atticus transferred the full balance of the Liberation Trust. The number was life-altering. I bought the cottage with the studio. The sale was finalized the same day the news broke. Eleanor Wellington indicted on charges of conspiracy, wire fraud, and misuse of charitable funds. On our first night in the new house, Lily and I planted the dogwood tree in the backyard. As we patted the soil, a courier delivered a package. Inside, with no return address, was a simple, beautiful bowl made of cherry wood. The note inside read, "For your new table, Gabe and the Co-op." It was a welcome to a community I'd built, not inherited. I placed the bowl on the hall table I'd made, the one with the river of blue epoxy. It fit perfectly. The past and the present, both built by my own hands, finally at peace. The walls had closed in, but I didn't just escape them. I took apart the very house that built them, stone by stone, using the truth as my hammer. And from the rubble, I built a home. But the ruined soil wasn't hard to find. It was everywhere. The Wellington name was etched in brass or whispered with false reverence. Their legacy was a gilded swamp, and I knew I had to drain it. The seed, the whole truth, was buried with the one person Eleanor couldn't fully control. The family's former driver, Samuel, a man who had seen everything from the rearview mirror for 20 years. He'd slipped me a note weeks ago, with just a time and a diner address, a flicker of conscience in the corporate machine. I found him in a vinyl booth, nursing black coffee. His kind eyes were heavy. "Mrs. Grant, Ilara," he corrected himself. "I was there the night Mr. Carter didn't come home. He wasn't running from you. He was running from her." He pushed a small, encrypted USB drive across the sticky table. Voice memos. Mr. Carter recorded arguments on his phone. He was scared, not of exposure, but of his mother. She knew about the gambling, the phantom investments. She authorized the transfers to cover his debts, to protect the brand. The fraud was a family operation. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just Carter's weakness. It was Eleanor's calculated crime. "The final transfer," Samuel said, his voice dropping. "The big one that triggered the investigation." The signature was forged. Carter's name, but her hand. She was setting him up to take the full fall if it ever came apart. He must have realized it. That's why he vanished. The seed wasn't just a truth. It was a live grenade. Atticus helped me anonymize the evidence. We sent it not to the press, but to 3 places: the SUC, the federal prosecutor already circling the Wellington case, and the board of Wellington International's largest institutional investor. The explosion was quiet, professional, and absolute. Headlines bloomed online within days. Wellington matriarch implicated in cover-up. SEC expands probe to include Eleanor Wellington. The board forced her to step down as chairperson to focus on her legal defense. The family's prestige, their most prized possession, began to rot from the inside out. I didn't feel triumph. I felt a profound, quiet finality. I had planted the seed of truth in their poisoned foundation, and as my mother promised, something was finally growing from that ruin: justice. The final letter from Atticus arrived with a certified check and a deed. The Liberation Trust had fully matured. The sum was life-changing, enough to buy the small craftsman cottage I'd secretly dreamed of, with a sunlit studio shed out back, and to fully fund Grant and Daughter Designs, my own woodworking business. On moving day, Lily and I stood in our new backyard, holding a single sapling, a dogwood, for strength and resilience. We placed it in the rich, dark earth, not ruined soil, but fertile ground. "What are we growing, Mommy?" Lily asked, patting the earth. "Our future," I said. As we watered the roots, my phone buzzed. A news alert: Eleanor Wellington, formally indicted on charges of conspiracy and fraud. I swiped it away, knelt in the grass, and wrapped my arms around my daughter. The walls had closed in, but my mother's map led me out. I had built, I had spoken, I had grown. The cage door was open, and I was never, ever going back. And so, the last page turns on Ilara's story. She built her new life, not from the blueprints of the past, but with the strength she found in the rubble. Her journey reminds us that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't rage, it's peace. It's not destruction, it's creation. It's building a new table and gathering your true family around it. Her mother's letter was a map out of the darkness, and I hope, in some way, her story has been a map for you too. There are so many more tales of resilience, quiet strength, and beautiful new beginnings waiting to be told. Until next time, and
Thank you for spending this time with us. I truly hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, ideas, or suggestions for future stories, feel free to share them in the comments below. Your thoughts mean a lot to us. If this journey warmed your heart, don't forget to like the video and share it with someone who loves stories like these. And to continue exploring new tales and adventures, subscribe to Hearthlight Saga. Until next time, may your days be filled with light and wonder.